So Brad here, doing the question and answer stuff in relation to Boogie's development. Now, I apologise that it's taken a little longer for me to get to this than what I had intended. We've had a pretty hectic couple of weeks between Boogie. We've had some water damage at our office and trades in and out and a whole bunch of other stuff, plus trying to put together all the footage for you guys and run a business. So I definitely appreciate you guys bearing with me, but I was absolutely committed to fulfilling this promise. So now I'm going to go through the questions that we put off our Facebook and Instagram channels, and I'm going to answer all of these questions. Now, some of the questions intersect, but I'm going to go through them one by one because you took the time to answer them, to ask them rather. So I'm going to take the time to answer them. And we're going to start off in no particular order. So if that produces some repetition, you're just going to have to deal, kids. Alrighty. So Purple Suki asks the following question. What would you do if something unexpected happened whilst out socialising Boogie, something that was outside of my control, such as a loud noise, a stray football hitting him, etc., and he reacted badly? I'm sure I have a plan and you'd love to know how I would handle it. So, Purple Suki, we've actually got a video up where that did happen. Now, I'll just make a fine distinction here. I don't know that anything truly unexpected happens with any frequency in relation to all of this, because I'm always expecting something out of the norm to happen. So I'm always doing the best that I can, which is flawed, but doing the best that I can to contingency plan. And the skate park exposure video that we put up on that I put up on YouTube, that's what they call it, includes a breakdown of all of that and how we handled that. So what I can say about this stuff is that when I'm building a dog, and this is not just the way that I do things, this is the way that other knowledgeable, experienced professionals do things, right? We do things in considered ways, and we teach things in certain ways, and we teach certain things in some ways and not in other ways. And so the aim is to always have multiple options available that we can chop and change and roll in between, looking for something effective to navigate the situation. I think the biggest thing to help people, the biggest thing that people can know, like the average pet owner can know, is in terms of controlling the unexpected. A lot of our clients and a lot of sort of industry friends and perhaps some less experienced dog trainers and whatever else, they actually find problems with managing people and their dogs, and people wanting to have or forcing upon the dog undesirable interactions. And I think that being proactive in your management of that and being able to speak up and be very clear and say, hey, just stay back there, okay? I'm not interested in my puppy interacting with you, or please keep your distance. My puppy's scared even when your puppy's not scared. There are things that you can do in this regard that definitely help you to manage much more. Now, something unexpected can happen, and as I've covered both in the video that we've posted and in relation to the stuff that I've just said, I feel like I've pretty much answered that. How I would handle it would really depend upon the situation. And again, I'll refer you back to that video on YouTube. So, thank you for your question, Suki. Purple Suki. So, Hannah Wilson has asked, how do I manage 3 dogs in my household? What are my do's and don'ts? So, there's a number of questions in relation to this. The first step to me integrating this puppy into my household, well, this puppy actually has to be integrated into 2 households. It has to be integrated into the fairy dog mother's household and my household. However, the dogs are common amongst them, okay? So for the longest time, I don't try and introduce the pup to the older dogs. It's not something that I'm interested in. I'm only interested in my dogs seeing that the other dog is around. They have no need to interact. They simply come to know over a period of weeks, hey, the little guy is on the scene. The boss is good with him, and we should just ignore this because it appears to be business as usual for us. All our expectations are the same. As far as do's and don'ts, I think the biggest one that people can take away from the way I do things, and this applies to like introducing kids to a household and whatever, don't go chasing your tail. Make sure that things are squared away and you've got good patterns, good routines, good communication and a good level of training before you even attempt to introduce a second dog into your house, let alone a third. This is particularly true of very high drive, very confident dogs with a high potential for competition over resources. You want to make sure that you have good influence over their behavior before you introduce another dog, because if you don't, then you're pushing shit uphill and it's a pretty stupid way to do things. So once my older dogs are completely used to the fact that the puppy is on the scene and they barely raise an eyebrow, at some stage there will be some kind of interaction where they express interest in each other. Now that will usually happen in the back of my van where I have a custom crate set up and the puppy will be transported next to one of the older dogs. It's a very safe way to go about things. It's impossible for the puppy to put anything valuable through the divider between the crates, like a paw or a nose. The mesh is too close together for that to happen, and it's been designed that way. And so again, they get used to being out as part of a group, and that's where they'll have a good solid number of interactions well before they have any supervised interactions. Then I would usually transition to some short interactions where the older dog is on leash and the puppy is running free around. I of course preface this with what I said earlier about having a good level of influence over my dog's behaviour and a good level of control built into the older dogs where I'm trying to do this. And in all of those instances, I make sure that I protect the older dog from the puppy being too full on. There is an order to things, and the puppy needs to learn that he is at the bottom of that pecking order. Of course, I'm not talking about some strict hierarchical model of dominance, right? It's completely against nature, I would argue, for some little puppy to breeze into a group of older dogs and just assume that it can have control of all of the things that it wants. And it's very useful for my puppy to learn that not everything goes his way. I want my older dogs to teach that. I don't want to have to do that, because the reality is that managing dog-to-dog interactions like that is extremely flawed in terms of its potential. Me managing that interaction, micromanaging it, helicoptering it, that's an ABC, that's a dog-human interaction. And I'm interested in setting things in place for it to be a dog-dog interaction, for them to have a good understanding of each other and for them to get along when I'm not around. That's my end game. So me micromanaging things and those good interactions being dependent on me is really quickly becomes counterproductive. So yeah, I'm not in any rush and I like to take my time, and it can take months for me to be happy with leaving them alone for a short period of time. There's no set agenda, there's no set protocol for it. So moving on to, so thank you for your question, Hannah. Moving on to Christy, I'm sorry, I can never get your surname right. Christy Tunison. Christy and I have trained together. She's a lovely lady, so she'll forgive me. But how much time does Boogie get with the other dogs? Is it more about building a relationship with you? So on the back of Hannah's question just now, Boogie gets far more time with me than he would with the other dogs. Time with me and training with me starts straight away. Now, I'll lead this into Christy's next question, which is when will I start teaching Boogie obedience and introducing other skills apart from socialization and environmental work that I'll want from him and as an older dog. So Boogie starts working with me the day he comes home. Nearly all his food comes from me. And at this point, I would say 95% of his calories have come behind a clicker. So he gets some bigger meals behind that click, but the clicker is the one constant signal that is always salient to him, it's always relevant to him, and it always pays with food at this point. So we start that ASAP. And the reason that I do that is because it is far more important that Boogie view me as high value. I always want to be able to outshine, in Boogie's mind, the value that my other dogs hold. So them spending too much time, especially in free play and chasing each other and whatever else, is counterproductive to Boogie's development. And until I can have a really strong influence over putting Boogie into arousal states and asking, setting some good patterns in place, and me being the diamond that shines for him well above and beyond what my other dogs can offer, I'm very, very careful about how much time he spends with the other dogs and the format that happens. And I'll refer you back to Hannah's previous question, which answers some of that as well. These are very good questions. So thank you, Christy, for your question. Just to finish off the last part of that, obedience skills for Boogie, we touch on them. We do some heel work. And what's far more important to me is setting in place the framework upon which teaching those skills is set up. You'll see that from the videos that we share. The actual skills, the sits and the drops and whatever else, they're pretty easy to teach and they come pretty quickly, particularly when the dog understands the framework of communication that I use to teach him those things. It happens very quickly. We've done a little bit of strict obedience work, but really not a lot. Much more concerned with getting him further along in the program with his environmentals and some of the more specific things that he's going to need to go on to a working role. Which leads us really nicely into another question. Let me just pick this one here. So it's from Sarah. Sarah Weissum, my dear friend. Sarah's an excellent dog trainer in her own right. She has an Instagram page called Monkey Chefy. I think that's what she calls it at the moment. You can check out Sarah's one of the better dog trainers here in Melbourne. She won't talk it up, but I will tell you that. She does excellent work. And she's only been at it for a few years and she has just improved out of sight. My guess would probably be maybe, 6 years or something, but she's really on top of her game. So check out her Instagram channel. So what's the structure of Boogie's day like? How much crate time and alone time does he get? Boogie gets a lot of crate time and alone time. Most of his alone time, or all of his alone time, will be either in a puppy pen with a comfortable bed and some room for him to walk around, or it will be in a crate. I'd say 95% of it. When he spends time at the fairy dog mother's house, he's left alone in the backyard. The backyard's particularly well set up. Of course, there's always dangers leaving a little Malinois pup out in the backyard alone because there's shit that they can get into, and they're not necessarily, strong little Mallee pups are not necessarily renowned for making the best decisions about their own safety. So you play it by ear and you wouldn't leave it too long and you'd want to check in. But definitely plenty of alone time. One of the main areas that people trip up when they have pet dogs, let alone working dogs, is that they fail to invest the proper amount of time in the younger dog's independence. They assume that the older dogs will produce in that young dog a similar type of temperament to what the older dog displays. Really poor choice. So yeah, Boogie gets tons of time alone every day. If he's not alone, then he would be with me, and then there's a comparatively small section where he may be with one of the older dogs, in line with some of the information that I've shared earlier in this video. So the structure of Boogie's day is we would train together most days about 4 times a day. We'll do some exposure work, some skills work, and some drive development work. And it runs like that nearly every day. I do give Boogie the odd day where he will just chill for half a day in the fairy dog mother's backyard and just learn to be alone and learn to just chill in his environment, because that is equally as important as all these other things. He needs to understand how to be confined. He needs to understand how to be alone. He needs to understand how to be comfortable being alone, relaxed, quiet, calm, self-assured. He's doing tremendously well there. So Sarah, great question. Kane. So Kane has noticed that since Boogie came on the scene, he's picked things up pretty quickly. And he's asked, compared to other pups that I've worked with, including my own, how quickly has he picked things up in comparison to them? I think that's the way the question runs. So is that a reflection of Boogie's breed and genetics, his attitude and personality, or the fact that I actually know what I'm doing, or all of the above? Thanks for saying I know what I'm doing. I'll do my best. Some days I wonder though. But it's all of the above, Kane. So the boys at Varg, my dear friends that bred Boogie, they don't muck around. They're not interested in breeding show dogs. And just for the record, people that breed Malinois for show and not for work, they stand to decimate the breed, and they're doing a terrible thing, and it's all for their ego, and it's complete bullshit, and they should shut up shop and stop doing what they're doing before the Malinois becomes like the Doberman and the German Shepherd and the Rottweiler. So now I've made that political stamp. The genetics, Boogie's genetics are great. His attitude and personality are super, and the fact that this is not my first rodeo raising a pup towards these kind of outcomes definitely helps, because there's always something for someone to learn working with a dog. It's just that I'm not thrown too many curveballs. I think Boogie is very good. He's a very pleasurable dog to live with. For his level of desire to work, he's extraordinarily pleasurable to live with, and the fairy dog mother finds exactly the same thing when he's here. He's very happy to chill. He's actually remarkably easy to have around the house when he's out and about. He's so far ahead of the curve in terms of accepting the confinement that comes with being in his crate. But he's still a puppy. He still has brain farts, and he still carries on sometimes, and you just got to try and understand why that is, and continue to accommodate that. So far, I think he's a very good pup. But Boogie's purpose is to be developed for a law enforcement or military type role. He's not contracted, as I've said before, right? So I'm basically a free agent developing this dog. And if something did crop up that indicated Boogie was unsuitable, we would put Boogie into a home that was suitable for him, and he would be cut from the program, and I would begin the same project again with a new dog. I'm not interested in mucking around with dogs that are substandard. Not all dogs are created suitable for that role. If the dog is shit, then you can't make a shit dog suitable and mask things in good conscience. When you go out there and you've got a member of a military unit, or you've got a member of law enforcement out on the street, it's your job as a reputable vendor to put yourself and those people and the end user at the forefront, and not ruin your reputation by being a greedy dick and and acting blind to the things that you see, or being deceitful. There's a big answer for you, Kane, but great question. Thanks for asking. So Yanster has asked, would you handle Boogie differently if you had to train him in a townhouse where crate and separation training, noise extinction has a greater sense of urgency? No. Let me tell you why. Puppies make noise. A Malinois, on the whole, Malinois tend to be pretty vocal little dogs. So if you want to own a dog and that's your situation, get your neighbours on side. Play a smart game, but you have to give the dog time to adjust, right? Living in a townhouse really isn't too different. I've done this before, living in a goddamn bungalow, and you know what? There are some actually some really distinct advantages to that. But you've got a ton of options there that it probably falls outside the realms of this video to comment on them all, but most certainly it wouldn't produce a greater sense of urgency because the dog can only learn as fast as the dog can learn, and it takes dogs time to adjust. So there we go. Now, Katie with dogs. Great question you answered, by the way. Thank you. So Katie with dogs has asked, am I socialising with other dogs by allowing them to meet, play, etc., or socialising in to be more neutral to those dogs? Example, acknowledging other dogs but teaching him that I'm more interesting. Bloody brilliant question. There's no need for Boogie at this stage to meet any other dogs out in public. I expose Boogie to dogs owned by friends of mine that I consider to be great examples, to have strong play styles that are very equitable and very advantageous for Boogie to be involved with. Of course, he also has, my two dogs are very different in terms of my two older dogs, in terms of their personalities, and it's great for him to have individual relationships with them. You are absolutely correct. It's far more important that I can motivate Boogie to a high level and hold his attention and have great engagement and have him know that I play like a superstar than it is for him to want to go and play with other dogs. I want him to think that other dogs are just something that's there, and if there are other dogs around, I'm likely to be ready to pay him for something. I never want him to see other dogs as having any level of interest for him outside of a context where I clearly set him up to play with them. He does not need to meet members of the public's dogs. He does need to be responsive because we hope that he grows into a very strong dog, right? And I want him to be completely comfortable around other dogs without any fear, without any hesitation in being around them, and to be as completely reachable by the handler as possible. Super question, Katie. I really like that. And let me just say on that, that's where the majority of puppy classes these days fall down. If you're going to a puppy class and a large component of the puppy class is simply letting dogs free for all, right? And if you're in a puppy class where you're having trouble motivating your dog because of the way that the curriculum is set up and you're not being taught how to motivate appropriately, how to manage the distance between your dog and other dogs to give yourself an appropriate chance. If you're all jammed into the reception area of a veterinary surgery and as I said, it's a free-for-all, then that's a shit puppy class and you need to get the hell out of there and get to someone that knows what they're doing if you want to make the most of your dog. We see so many problems at CSI, and I know other friends in my industry see massive problems when too much desire to interact with other dogs is conditioned very early, particularly where the owner can't compete. Don't worry about Snap, there's clearly a delivery. So, on to the next question. Jinxie's World has asked a great question. Is one exposure really enough to make a difference? I know that supposedly during the critical period, everything puppies experience is supposedly with them permanently, but I've always wondered. So just to break... Oi! Snappy! Chill out, buddy. Go on. So, to answer the first half of that, it's not supposedly permanent. The term used is relative permanency, which means that it tends to stick with them much better. It's not supposed to be permanent per se, but the term is relative permanency. So let's take your escalator session, for example. That's not something the average person can do multiple times. Rubbish. Why not? Have you tried? You don't know if you don't ask. And just because you can't access one escalator, what about another? There are plenty of escalators at train stations and lifts at train stations and a whole bunch of other public places that are quite accessible. So I don't agree with that. But it's very easy for someone to say that they can't do something, but often it's the case that they won't do something or they don't prioritise it. So if people get off their ass and turn off the television and put down their mobile phone, many people could get a lot more achieved with their puppies during their critical period. Will a pup really remember that one escalator ride he's had when he's 12 months old? Assuming nothing has gone horribly wrong at the first session, of course. Cool. So whether it's an escalator ride or not, what you've got to understand is that it's not really about one exposure. There is two ways to look at this. Number one, I want him to be exposed to that escalator so that there's nothing odd about that picture to him. But what you've got to understand is that the cumulative effect of vastly disparate exposures builds quickly, and to a large degree it's about teaching a dog to perceive and process and tackle novelty well. That's a cumulative effect. So can you put it down to really one exposure? Well, I'm not really giving my dog one exposure. I'm trying to give my dog as many exposures as I can that happen in a great way with great outcomes for that dog. So, you know what? I'll put it to you like this. If your dog has shit genetics and the odds, or you don't know what the dog's genetics are like, you would want to be doing even more work. I often see people who feel that their dog has superior genetics and they sort of try and coast it in on that and they wind up with problems later. You can only play with what God's given you in that puppy, or Allah, or whoever you believe in, right? So what nature has provided, and you can maximize it or not. And so do you really want a chance? Well, I won't bother with the one exposure because I can't do 4 of them. Well, why not do 4 very different exposures and let the cumulative effect pick up there, yeah, and play a positive effect? So it's a brilliant question. It's great. Appreciate it, Jinxie's World. And I hope that you find that that's a sufficient answer. Monica Musky Paws has asked, how do I find time to not only ensure Boogie gets the training and exposure he needs at this critical time, as well as continue training with my other dogs? Simply put, I don't. I focus on Boogie. I have nothing upcoming, so there's a trial upcoming. I decided not to enter Snap in it. That's because I'm devoting much more time to Boogie. The other dogs get maintained. The way that I exercise them and the way that I maintain them keeps their trainability there. That was sort of evidenced, I guess, a little bit by the fact that I took Snap to BH on a very short period of notice, and we hadn't been doing a lot formally prior to that. But the way that I maintain her cues are clear. And she wasn't perfect in a BH, but we had some compliments, and the judge was very complimentary at the time in relation to her performance. And so realistically, that's about prior training and maintenance. But 110%, this dog is 110% my responsibility. And if he does show to me or does cause concern for me that he's insufficient in regards to his character or temperament, or that he has a genetic issue, then I need to know 110% that is not because I was lazy or neglectful in anything that I did. And so he is absolutely my prime focus. And then I go to great lengths to make sure that the other dogs are happy. But in terms of time and in investment of training time, in between running all the other elements of CSI, Boogie is the prime focus. So that's it, guys. That was really long, but I really wanted to do what I could to answer everybody's questions, because I appreciate you guys following along. There's a million social media channels, and yet you're choosing to follow along with ours, and to follow along with Boogie's development. And I think that that's really cool. So I hope those of you that ask questions had them answered and you feel that I answered them appropriately and fully. And I will finally sign off for now and get this uploaded to YouTube so that you guys can check it out. That's it. Take care, and I'll run another Ask Me Anything about Boogie's development later down the track. But for now, it's done and dusted. You guys have a great week. Take care.